This episode of the Dr. Tina Show, The Quick and Dirty, I'm going to be talking with you about some recent data that's come out around long COVID and exercise. Now, it's been long assumed and recommended that if you have post-exertional malaise due to any type of condition, most notably around viral infections, long COVID. We called it post-viral syndrome before it was a thing with COVID. This is something I have struggled with since I was 19 years old with a different virus. It can come on from the flu. It can come on from any variety of viruses. And the going recommendations is to not exercise. That's honestly, but what the going recommendations have been. And particularly around long COVID, the recommendations are to not exercise. And I think that's just bonkers. And here's why. Because say you were really fit and you got slammed by a virus and now you're dealing with the post-viral sequelae and you can't get up and you feel awful. Exercise seems really like a long reach, right? It seems like something that is not only going to be difficult to do, but it's potentially going to cause you to flare or rebound in a negative way. I get it. I've been there. I completely understand. The other problem, though, is say you went into it really deconditioned, and let's just be honest here, most Americans are severely deconditioned. So say you went into it deconditioned. If you don't exercise, even if it's hard, you're just going to end up more deconditioned. Really, what's at the root of all of these long viral syndromes is mitochondrial dysfunction and mitochondrial fatigue. So you've got these pooped out mitochondria, most often going in, then you get slammed with a virus. And now on the other side, your mitochondria are fried, you're fried, you've got adrenal fatigue. Definitely COVID tends to push people over the edge. So if they're sitting on the edge of menopause, now they're in menopause. If they're sitting on the edge of hypothyroidism, now they're in it. And all of these go together, right? And really at the root of all this for most folks, 94% of US adults is metabolic dysfunction. So everything just gets exacerbated. And now the person is like dead tired on the couch and can't get up. And the thought of exercise is daunting. And when you do exercise, it's hard and you have to lay down in between sets. And it just seems like too much. And then it might set you into a flare, set you back several weeks sometimes. I've been there. I get it. But if your mitochondria are fatigued, you're not going to get out of that ever without exercise, especially without muscle. There's just no way around it. There's no amount of IVs or supplements or prescription medications. There's nothing that the allopathic system really can offer you at this point. Functional medicine has a lot of tools. Chinese medicine has tools, and there are ways to rebuild a constitution of a person and bring them back from these long viral syndromes. But if your mitochondria are shot and you can't exercise, it means you can't sweat. And if you can't sweat and you can't gather electrons through movement, you're never going to get out of this. And so the deconditioning worsens, the fatigue worsens, everything worsens if you don't exercise. And since the standard of care has been to tell people to not exercise, which again, I think is crazy, when I have dared to mention exercise and long COVID, people jump all over me. It is amazing. The more metabolically unsound you get due to lack of muscle mass, due to lack of exercise, due to lack of movement, the more awful you're going to feel. And it's just going to snowball out of control, as I've talked about on so many podcasts before, is like once you start on that trajectory of metabolic dysfunction, the end result of that is type 2 diabetes, and everyone thinks, oh, well, that's manageable. Like that's really the misnomer out there is, oh, that's manageable. I'll get put on medication. No, you will deal with cardiovascular disease. If that doesn't take you out, you're going to deal with kidney disease. If that doesn't take you out, we're talking dialysis, guys, like a life of dialysis. If that doesn't take you out, there's potential for limb loss and blindness. If that doesn't take you out, you're going to end up not knowing who you are with severe dementia because Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes. So this is a real problem. And so we're telling people that are sick. And again, full disclosure, I have been there. I had long cytomegalovirus, whatever you want to call it, post-viral syndrome. Up until 2020, all of us who were dealing with post-viral syndrome were gaslit by the medical establishment and told there was nothing wrong with us. And then if you were old enough, you were told that you had chronic fatigue syndrome. And guess what? All of those patients came in every single fibromyalgia, every single one. Every single fibromyalgia patient, every single chronic fatigue patient that walked in my doors over a decade in practice, busy practice. I had a lot of those people because I specialized in pain. Every single one of them told me they couldn't exercise. They were told not to, and they just couldn't do it. It was too hard. It hurt too much. And I'm sitting there living with those conditions in front of them as living proof that you can. And people would say, oh, no, no, I can't. It hurts too much. And all of them were deconditioned, and all of them had metabolic syndrome, and all of them just had worsening and worsening and worsening symptoms. It drove me nuts. They wouldn't even hear it because the standard is to not do anything. We don't want to flare you. We don't want to make things worse. So don't do anything. And I can't accept that. And when I try to speak about it on social media, I get chewed up and spit out by the long COVID community because they're like, you don't understand. We have chronic illness. You don't understand. I'm like, I freaking have chronic illness. I totally understand. The only reason I'm standing here in any semblance of order is because I exercise regularly and I eat well and I do all the things I was told didn't matter or couldn't be done, right? And here's my story. I'm laying on the couch. I'm a mess. And I've got a toddler. And I knew how this went. I've seen other family members go down this route. And I remember looking at my daughter laying on the couch and she's begging me to play with her. And I can't muster the energy to get up. I can barely open my eyes. My migraine's so bad. And I remember looking at her and thinking, she does not deserve a mother like this. She does not deserve this. I have got to do something about this. And granted, I went into my pregnancy super fit. I was super fit when I went in. I was surfing, I was tan, I was working out all the time. And I came out the other side of pregnancy just done. I was just done. Prior to that, I'd gotten slammed with cytomegalovirus in college. And I had just sort of come out of that cloud and fog. And here I was going into pregnancy, actually at the top of my physical game finally, and get hit again, right? Pregnancy just sends me sideways. And I'm a couple years in, I'm looking at my toddler thinking, I can't do this to her. I can't be this kind of mother. I have got to get out of this. And you know what I did? Nothing. I didn't do much of anything. I kind of puttered around at the gym. I kind of puttered around with my nutrition. I kind of played with it. I did a bunch of cardio, like in spurts, thinking that was it. And then I would flare and I'd get set back and I'd say, oh, I can't exercise. It's too much. It's too much on my system. I totally get it, you guys. And one day I just decided to get my shit together. And you've heard me say it before. You either decide to do that or you don't. If you don't decide to do it, you're never going to crawl out of this hole. I've done episodes on this in the past. I will link them up in the show notes. Episode 40, way back when I interviewed my good friend, Dr. Amber Belt, about long COVID. She was treating it in real time in her clinic. We talked about it. We both are avid strength trainers and exercisers. So we had a conversation about that in there as well, I believe. And then episode 134, I did not that long ago, where I talked about my thoughts on long COVID, mold, and Lyme, because everybody wants my thoughts. And my thoughts are, you have to get your body hot. You have to get hot enough to start cooking out whatever it is that's decided to make a home in you and make you sick. And so we have to muster up our vitality. That's it. We have to stoke our vitality. It's slow and low, just like everything else. And we got to get the fire reignited inside so that we can start to burn more brightly. If we don't, that flame's just going to keep diminishing and keep diminishing and keep diminishing. If you're in your 20s or your 30s or your 40s and you're listening to this and you're like, I am flat on my back, Dr. Tina, I feel awful. Or maybe you're getting mad at me right now. I'm feeling triggered. I'm telling you, if you don't do anything proactive, especially exercise, you are going to be significantly worse off 10 years from now. You won't be better. This doesn't improve unless you actively improve it. And step number one is movement. You got to sweat. So we have sauna to do that. I think sauna is brilliant here. I've talked about this in many episodes. It's an exercise mimetic. It can get you started. And I talk about that more in episode 134. But you have to actually physically move and you have to start building muscle. And you can't do that with a sauna. You can't do that with a hot bath. You can't do that with anything else. You actually have to move your body and put in the work. And there are ways to do this slow and low. You really should seek out some help, some rehab, some physical therapy, whatever it may be. Maybe you hire a strength and conditioning coach who understands. You tell them, I have limitations. I have to go slow and low. But you have to start, and it will be easier if you can find a group or you can find individual instruction and guidance. You got to find somebody to help you get going, to hold you accountable. If you can muster it up on your own, muster it up on your own. Maybe you have a spouse that's very active and they can, influence you and they can help support you and guide you. Whatever it may be, take advantage. Maybe your best friend's active and fit. If you don't have any fit people around you, you need to find new people. That's the first part. You will become the 5 people you are around the most. So find new people to hang out with who will motivate you, because having a pity party where everybody's just miserable together and lets their health go together is no way to live as a human. And we have too much of that in the world already. So finding role models and people that you can mirror is critical. As a human being, we need to mirror things. It's unconscious. If you want to be wealthy, you need to hang out with wealthy people. If you want to be successful, you have to hang out with successful people. If you want to be fit, you have to find fit people. That's what the gym is for and why you find community there. Maybe it's a CrossFit gym. Maybe that's too intense for you. Maybe find a CrossFit gym that's really specifically for middle-aged women. When I got started back into my fitness journey, I kid you not, I went to a yoga class that was for very elderly women, and we all did chair yoga. And I was sweating bullets and getting a great workout. And that's where I had to start. I started with chair yoga and a bunch of little old ladies. Now I do Pilates twice a week with most everybody in there's older than me, and half of them are significantly older, and they're amazing, and it kicks my butt. And I have no pride to be like, oh, I'm better than this because I'm younger, or I think I should be more fit because I can deadlift 200 pounds, so I can do a more advanced Pilates class. Could I do a more advanced Pilates class? Sure. Would it flare me? Probably. So I dance this dance still, you guys. I deal with chronic pain myself. I deal with chronic issues and chronic autoimmune conditions. I dance this dance with you. And I'm speaking from experience personally and clinically. I've helped many, many patients overcome this. So trust me when I tell you, you're not going to get better unless you actively try to get better. So with that, let's jump into some of the data and I'll tell you why you feel so shitty, because there are reasons. Yes. So this was a study from 2023. It's called Differential Cardiopulmonary Hemodynamic Phenotypes in PASC-related exercise intolerance. Basically, what they did was, let me find the summary for you because I pulled it up. Okay, so basically what they did was they looked at a small group of people and they did a very invasive PET scan of their heart. They put a catheter into their pulmonary artery. And what they found was in these 55 patients, when they evaluated for post-COVID exercise intolerance, 41 of whom showed no evidence or heart or lung limitations after initial tests, they underwent this very invasive cardiopulmonary exercise test. And what they found was, despite the fact that the heart was pumping oxygenated blood that the lungs were providing adequate amounts of oxygen for, the extraction of oxygen by the body's tissues was compromised. So the body wasn't actually taking up the oxygen as you would expect in the patients who had symptoms of exercise intolerance after COVID. And this makes sense because COVID is a vascular disease at its core. That's why it's been so devastating, is because it really does a number on the vascular system. And there's other studies that they've looked at that have yielded similar results. And so we're having an oxygen tissue uptake issue. And then another study that was, let's see, this one was in Nature Communications. This was from January 2024, so of this year. Muscle abnormalities worsen after post-exertional malaise and long COVID. They looked at a subgroup of patients infected with the virus. And again, this was a small group. This post-exertional malaise they were reporting, this is the hallmark of long COVID, and it's similar to, like I mentioned, chronic fatigue syndrome. So they say that the idea that exercise can help patients has proven difficult to shake, despite evidence suggesting this isn't merely a case of deconditioning that patients can overcome by pushing through the pain. These doctors are saying that they're having an abnormal response to exercise. And this new paper in Nature gives us some clarity on why. They took biopsies from long COVID patients before and after exercising in the Netherlands, these scientists were, and they constructed a startling picture of widespread abnormalities in muscle tissue that may explain the severe reaction to physical activity. One of the most striking findings was that there were mitochondrial compromise. Just like I said, the tissues were literally starving for energy. That's what your mitochondria do. They're the engines of your cell. So this was very profound that they found, and the tissue samples also revealed more severe muscle damage, a disturbed immune response, and buildup of microclots. So We've got exercise intolerance at the muscle level. We've got exercise intolerance at the oxygenation uptake level. This all makes perfect sense why things are difficult when you try to exercise after you're dealing with some of these long post-viral syndromes. They also found that metabolites in the blood related to energy production were also severely reduced in long COVID patients. They started producing lactate, which is that fuel of last resort, really, for the cells much sooner during exercise than those who were healthy. And this is just another sign that the mitochondria are working in a dysfunctional way. They're not operating at optimal capacity. So taking all of this together, we've got tissue issues galore. That's what we'll call it. What's the solution? We have to go slow and low, and we have to retrain these tissues to function. And as I would tell my patients, I will tell you the same. It gets worse before it gets better. That's all there is about it. It gets worse before it gets better. So let me end by sharing this last study. So this just came out, Functional Limitations and Exercise Intolerance in Patients with Post-COVID Condition, a randomized crossover clinical trial. And the key points were here that they basically asked the question, do non-hospitalized patients experiencing post-COVID condition have exaggerated post-exercise symptoms after high-intensity interval training, moderate intensity continuous training, and strength training? The findings in this randomized crossover clinical trial of 31 participants, so again, another small study, with this post-COVID condition and 31 match-controlled participants, the exercise response was largely comparable between the groups with no profound symptom exacerbation. Patients with PCC, post-COVID condition, reported more muscle pain after HIIT, which I understand. I get more muscle pain after HIIT, and concentration problems after the moderate intensity, and had lower aerobic capacity and less muscle strength. 62% showed myopathic signs. The findings suggest that cautious exercise rehabilitation should be recommended to prevent further deconditioning among patients with post-COVID condition. And the authors basically said that those who were having the confusion and some of the other post-exercise issues, that it was due to deconditioning because they'd had post-COVID syndrome and they were not moving for a long period of time. And it's very standard when you take people from a non-moving state into an exercise state for them to have these symptoms. So they're not saying that they're even using exercise to treat post-COVID. They wanted to be clear about that. But we know that not only in post-COVID, in any other disease, if you stop doing exercise in the long run, it'll affect your body, it'll affect your heart, it'll affect your vessels, it'll affect pretty much everything, one of the authors was quoted as saying. So post-COVID itself cannot be a contraindication to exercise. That's the conclusion. And they're saying go slow and low. This is my call to everybody out there listening. And if you're a health practitioner, I want you to take this to heart. We need to start developing programs that are physical rehabilitation-based programs for those with long COVID. I firmly believe this is the only way out. Yes, there's other things that can be done. Yes, there's other things you can do to stimulate your mitochondria, but you can't add more mitochondria to the body without adding muscle. So if we add muscle to the body, we add more mitochondria. So instead of taking the dysfunctional mitochondria we have and trying to fix them, yes, do that too. But my take was always, and the reason I started strength training personally was if I could add more muscle mass to my body, then I can add more mitochondria. If I can add more mitochondria, I have less mitochondria dysfunction. It's simple, right? So that's the goal. And it is a slow and low process. It's no joke. I have a program. It's called the Dr. Tina Strength Corner. You guys can pick it up. It's low cost. It'll get you started. And I understand. And all of the workouts in there are designed with that in mind. I understand. I understand how this goes. I understand how hard it is. I understand that sometimes we have to lie down between sets. I understand that sometimes I have to suck on a salt rock or put salt in my hand and lick it off in between sets. I understand that there's more to it. It's not as simple as just go exercise and you'll cure everything. I get it. That's not what I'm saying. This is part of what a comprehensive program looks like. And this is the core, and I will die on this hill. You have got to start exercising if you want to overcome anything. And if you want to live a long, healthy life, you have to add muscle to your body. These are not negotiable concepts. This is just how it is. Like it or not, want to fight me on it or not, it doesn't matter. These are non-negotiables. And so I'll post the link to this study in there. It just came out in JAMA. I thought it was great. I pulled it up. It was April 26, 2024. I pulled it up the other day and I was like, hallelujah. Finally, someone's coming around. We have to start moving because these post-viral syndromes are often a symptom of going into it deconditioned. More often than not, I'm not saying every case. I know perfectly healthy people that were, high-level athletes that went into it. But I'll tell you something those folks had in common. The ones that came out with long COVID that were fit going in, quote unquote fit, all of them were doing highly oxidative exercise when they went into it. So they were marathon runners, not strength and conditioning folks. They were high-level cyclists. They were doing lots and lots of oxidative exercise that's way too metabolically active, and it puts a lot of load on your system. And I'll tell you from clinical experience, everyone I saw in their 50s and 60s that were marathon runners and long distance cyclists all had diabetes. They all gave themselves diabetes through a long, whether they were thin or heavy set, it didn't matter. It was a long line of choices they made in their exercise that were highly oxidative. So you take somebody in that highly oxidized state and you put them into a terrible infection that has cardiovascular issues at its core, and you're going to come out the other side a hot mess. So I'm not judging anyone. I get it. I've been there myself, but we have to look at this for what it is. That's why I'm a big fan of strength training. It's slow and low. This is not oxidative work we're doing. We're not doing CrossFit. We're not doing Orange Theory. We're not trying to end up in a big sweat angel on the floor. We're just trying to build our muscles and build some stamina. So I'll leave you with that. I'll put the links to my strength corner in the show notes and you guys can check it out. I'll give you this study as well. And I hope you found this helpful. I'll talk to you later.